Join me in the audio garden to cultivate our collective wisdom, nurture creativity, and spread love. My name is Martha Senator. Welcome to Listen and Be Heard. It's so good to be here in the garden again with you. I always look forward to it. I love the wind chimes and chiming in with you, the listeners, all the visitors, writers, readers, and my animal friends too. And today is a special day because Davyne Dial, the general manager of WPVM Radio in Asheville, North Carolina, is meeting us here in the audio garden to talk with Catherine Jewell, a historian who has written an exhaustively researched book on college radio entitled Live from the Underground. The Poet Laureate and the Teen Poet Laureate of Greenville, South Carolina, will be here to plant some seeds for thought and action about banned books. And I'm going to do some digging in the archives for later in the show, so that's going to be a little surprise. We'll also feature the spoken word artistry today of the duo Climbing Poetry. That's Alexa Garcia and Naima Penniman. But first, let's hear a little music and poetry from Mother Earth. This is from the DJs for Climate Change project. It's called Ode to Nature and features the hoverfly. My name is Martha Senator, and this is the Listen and Be Heard Hour for writers and readers.
Together we will dance in tenderness, with hearts like the sun. We build a vision, our ancestors behind us, and they we know. What tiny miracle we all are on our way.
Davyne Dial is the general manager of WPVM, a community radio station in Asheville, North Carolina. And she's come here to the Audio Garden to meet with Catherine Rye Jewell, a historian and college radio lover from her Vanderbilt University days, who has written a lovingly detailed book called Live from the Underground. We have it in our little free library that you passed back by the grapevine. You could probably find out about everything you ever wanted to know about college radio in there. And you'll find a lot of band stories too. So Davyne and Catherine, they both know a lot about radio, and I've been looking forward to sitting on a bench and just listening into the conversation.
I have Catherine Rye Jewell in the studio, and she has written a book, Live from the Underground. So Kate uncovers how battles to control college radio were about more than music. They were an influential, if unexpected, front in the nation's culture wars. And so I was there for that. I was there for that time. I wasn't on the radio back then, certainly not in the 60s, but I am very aware of the influence that radio had during that time period. How, Kate, what was your decision to write this book?
So I did college radio as a student, as an undergraduate when I was at Vanderbilt University in the late 1990s. And it really formed such an important part of my college experience. But it was as a student activity. It was not something that I ever considered going into professionally. And so I was really kind of an observer in the world of radio and music and trying to learn about these underground music scenes that I was encountering. And for the most part, for me, it was just fun. It was just an interesting exploration until in 2011, the university decided to sell our radio station. And there was a big movement to try and save it. And I began asking questions like a historian does of, well, where did these stations come from? Why were we so invested in this particular way of doing radio? And what did it mean once the station went away? And what are the challenges that are presented to radio in our current moment?
College radio, when do you think it really got started?
So college radio has been around since radio itself, that students and electrical engineering departments started experimenting with radio. A lot of institutions, particularly Midwestern land-grant institutions, started investing in radio very early because they could provide really beneficial services and information to farmers, that they could send it out over the plains and they could pick it up in their farmhouses and get the information that they needed to participate in the market and to implement changes that were required in agricultural production. And once we begin to see that commercialized system of broadcasting come about in the 1930s, educational radio kind of gets pushed to the side in favor of the private run commercial system that we get in broadcasting in the United States. And it's only thanks to the efforts of some reformers who continued to push for educational radio that we get when FM comes along in the 1940s, we get that set aside of 88.1 to 91.9. But it's only in the 1960s that we start to see college radio emerge on FM in large numbers. And at that moment, these stations are really different. They're very local in their orientation and in the programming. It's usually for the campus only or for certain constituents around the campus. And they start to become conversant with things that are going on in popular culture, like freeform FM down on the commercial dial. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the early freeform stations start to pull in talent from the college stations, and they're very much in conversation with one another. And where I pick up the story in my book is in the 1970s, where those students have created this idea of alternative radio on college radio. But really, that just meant anything not mainstream, anything that you couldn't get on a commercial signal.
Yeah, anything non-corporate, basically.
Yeah, and they become to equate that with what it means to do educational radio. And it provides a lot of protection for them to do that, even as the commercial music industry is looking at what's going on at these stations and saying, "Ooh, this is really valuable. We can incorporate that into our business model."
So my theory is college radio was part of what I call a perfect storm that reflects American culture and the music that happened in the 60s and 70s. The fact that we had these freeform radio stations and college radio stations would not have happened without the magic of a radio signal. And my theory is that the music of that time will endure through the centuries because it came out of such a creative dynamic. There's so much conflict going on at the time. And when you have high conflict, that's fertile ground for creativity to emerge. And it did.
Yeah. And I think why college radio is so important to that story is because it's a place where the people doing radio are much closer to music fans than they were to musicians or to record label executives or commercial actors. And so these stations become really important sites of conflict over what the most valuable sounds are and who gets represented. So while they're reflecting what's going on in US culture and popular culture and popular music, they're also places where people are having these really very emotional debates over what is American culture, what does a pluralistic society sound like. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have so much affection for that music, because it symbolizes and it resonates with us because it pulls in those deeper kinds of cultural connections that we have with one another and the way that we create meaning through the experience of listening to music together and connecting over a sound, but also what that sound represents more broadly about our belonging as a nation and welcoming many types of voices into the sonic sphere.
You mentioned that you were at Vanderbilt in your college years, and then in 2011, Vandy sold the station to NPR. And I heard another interview where you mentioned that you were contemplating a follow-up book on the hostile takeovers of these college stations. You want to touch on your experience at Vanderbilt over this and your feeling about what went down?
Yeah. When I was doing radio in the late 90s, that was that post-1996 Telecommunications Act moment where there was the corporatization of commercial FM, rock radio in particular was accelerating, as well as just radio and broadcasting in general, and the decline of localism and broadcasting. And so we looked at, it was then, WKDF, which was the alternative rock giant in Nashville, as our big enemy. And I never would have expected that NPR would be the station that I would see as a rival to ours and to our way of doing radio, that they exist kind of, in concert with one another. They both emerge from a similar origin story out of the origins of educational radio. But NPR is very much a national vision, whereas educational radio run by students relies very much on localism. And I think one of the reasons why we felt so betrayed by Vanderbilt selling the station was because it seemed like it was coming from decision makers who were only operating with a view of a Vanderbilt identity that was seen on the national stage, that was in line with these national trends and how you define what a prestigious university looks like, and that they weren't looking at the way that Vanderbilt sits within a specific community within the city of Nashville, Music City, Tennessee, and Music City, USA, really, and that this station was a really important local community institution that provided really valuable connections between Vanderbilt, which, doesn't always have the best image in the city of Nashville, to put it mildly in some ways. And so they were giving up a really inexpensive way of creating those connections in a meaningful way that seemed nonsensical to us. And they were doing it by selling it out to sort of a corporatized version of what it was we were doing. Now, the story's not all a total sad ending, because out of the wreckage of WRVU, student-run radio still exists at Vanderbilt. They still have a streaming station, although the focus is less on the community. And we get a low-power FM signal out of it in WXNA, which was resurrected by a lot of the community participants at WRVU and continues to be that really strong voice of the community and of all the many, many sounds of Nashville. Because of course, Nashville is not just country music, even though we love it. It is, and it's many different forms of country, bluegrass, what have you.
This is the Listen and Be Heard hour for writers and readers, and my name is Martha Senator. We're in the audio garden with Davyne Dial, general manager of a community radio station, WPVM in Asheville, North Carolina, and Catherine Jewell, an expert on college radio history. I can tell you my personal experience with college radio and community radio a little bit. Back in the 80s, I used to listen to both kinds of radio in New York City. And very little commercial radio. I could listen to Columbia University Radio, which featured students' programs at the time, as well as dedicated experts in their fields. And there was Rutgers University Radio, as well as WBAI Community Radio, right in New York City, where I wound up also participating and producing radio and got the opportunity to learn how to do it there. Here in Greenville, currently, in Greenville, South Carolina, I'm right in the range of Furman University, but currently they only broadcast their sports events. And when I inquired, it's been years ago now, about possibly doing a radio show there, I was informed that that's only for students and that their students were doing streaming radio. So that's what's available currently through Furman University, which is my neighbor. Not really aware of what Clemson is doing. I'm not really wouldn't be in the range if they are broadcasting from that college. So that's what's currently going on around here. Although WLBH.org is now an option as well, and we hope to make it a broadcast option as well one day in the not too distant future. But let's go back and see what else these two radio experts, lovers, aficionados of radio are talking about.
I feel that the hunger and the desire is for more authenticity on the airwaves and up there in the ether, where everybody's being bombarded from every direction with propaganda and noise.
Yeah, and I think that there's a real desire that drove college radio to connect with certain types of music that you couldn't hear elsewhere. Now we can tune in and hear anything we want and connect with music fans of a certain genre across space. But the thing is that is not providing us with those local community connections. It's participatory, but I think people are still really hungering for that sense of connection and participation in their local geographic space. And college radio always had many different forms. It was many different types of radio rolled up into one. could be very professional. It could be very informative. It could be very staid. It could be very square. It could be very community oriented. It could be very campus oriented. And so I think what we're seeing is separating out of that role of community radio, and some campuses still really embracing that role, and others maybe ceding that responsibility to other types of institutions and business models for doing that type of radio that gives people that sense of participation.
You mentioned some of the controversies, a lot of the controversies that went on in college radio at the time. And it seems to me that college radio in general is a magnet for drama. This vein of controversy seems to be ubiquitous in the medium.
Yeah, it's really interesting to consider how high passions run over these signals and these technologies, because, it's this electromagnetic spectrum, yet there is something about the experience of doing radio and the kinds of connections that it forges that repeatedly when I talk to people now, I'm starting to get a lot of emails from people who've read the book or heard that I wrote about college radio and just have to express how much love they have for these stations. They want to tell everybody and tell me like how important they are. And that it's not just a sense of nostalgia, which can be part of it, of, maybe for a certain time in our lives when we're coming of age and figuring out who we are. It's this really important experience. That's part of it. But I think it's much more also about the kinds of connections that we forge through this medium and the kind of mystery that there is of sitting in a little room, and they're usually little rooms that often don't have any windows, and talking into a microphone, and the wonderful mystery of not really knowing who you're talking to, but yet having that sense of connection. And I think that's one of the differences that we have in the world of streaming, where I talked to a student who went through the transformation of Vanderbilt from a FM station to an online only station. And she said, I went from being able to talk, potentially to all of Nashville, whole metropolitan areas, this big, pretty high wattage station for a college signal, to all of a sudden I could see how many people were on the stream. And it was 4 people, and one was my roommate and one was my mom. And and it just changes how you experience it. It's still radio. It's still doing a form of broadcasting and connecting, but it is a very different way of doing radio.
Well, it's interesting that you have heard from people who have this deep passion for the medium. And I hear that too, not necessarily because I wrote a book about it, but I'm in contact with a lot of people who are involved in radio. But also with our volunteers who come and do radio for us, because we're a volunteer station. We're all volunteer. And to have people come in on a weekly basis, year after year, and continue putting something on the air, making it lively, making it fun, making it informative, the motivation to do that comes from very special, very rare people that are not on every street corner for sure. So this love and appreciation of the medium runs very deep in our collective psyche.
Yeah, I think so. And, I think that's one of the reasons why we need to be open for what radio's next chapter is going to be, and the different ways that we could continue it, and to provide that ability for students to still volunteer their time or pay them. We could pay them. that would be a decision we could make, so that they don't have to, go work at a coffee shop 30 hours a week to get through college, that they can go to the radio station, and that we preserve it as a place, not just to get certain skills to get a job, but as a place to make those bigger connections, to do that cultural exploration and connection that is really what these institutions are all about. They're about knowledge and cultural creation. And we have to be willing to make the investment in them as a society for those things to continue to be created.
I heard you mention in one of your interviews that it is difficult for students to also invest all that time in doing a show for a college station. And we have the same thing happening here in the community of Asheville, because in our case, people are having to pay their mortgage. They're having to put the kids through college. It turns out for us that a lot of our hosts, which are all volunteer, who experienced the 60s and 70s and 80s radio halcyon days, remember that and want to be expressing that for people who hear radio now to experience it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is one of the things that's happening to radio in general, is that the audience is growing older, even though it's still very much, a high percentage of Americans tune in to terrestrial radio on a weekly basis. It is skewing older. And I think that's why we have to preserve that space for younger people to get involved in it and to figure out what that next function is going to be. Very creative, right? They will figure it out. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you to give us a website or something where people can get in touch with you if they want more information or if they want to do an interview with you.
Sure.
Or read your book.
Yeah, read it. So I'm available at catherinejewell.com. I have a website with all of my contact details and information about the book, as well as some various links to all the things. I have also a series of playlists, and I recognize the irony of putting college radio playlists on Spotify, and a deep sense of betrayal, as some may feel as a result. But I do have very, very long 25 plus hour playlists that are drawn from the archives and the research that I've done.
So, Catherine, thank you so much for participating and doing an interview with WPPM. And thank you for writing a book about this incredible, magical medium of college radio.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you.
There's always an interesting conversation going on here in the audio garden. Thank you to Davyne Dial and Jewell for letting us listen in, taking the time to spend a little time in the garden. This is Listen and Be Heard, an hour for writers and readers. And my name is Martha Senator. This show is available as a podcast at listenandbeheard.net. You can also listen at WLBH.org, a fledgling streaming radio station. And I invite you to listen and to participate and to volunteer even. You could get in touch with me at editor@listenandbeheard.net. My name is Martha Senator. Next week is our winter special edition with Laura Langnick, author of Resilient Agriculture. We'll be talking about alternatives to capitalism as part of all of us becoming resilient together. And it could happen in surprisingly fun kinds of ways. Personally, I've been thinking about dreams as a way to becoming more resilient together. Just talking about our dreams. It's because of the books I've been reading, which I guess I'll tell you more about that later. But to get you primed for next week with Laura Langnick, I'm going to play something by Climbing Poetry from their 2017 album Intrinsic. It's called They're Selling the Rain. It might give us all an inkling of why we might want to keep talking about alternatives to capitalism. This is Listen and Be Heard Radio, WLBH.org. Welcome to the audio garden. Let's cultivate our collective wisdom, nurture creativity, and spread love.
Oh.
It's time we talk about the weather.
We in trouble, friends.
The storm clouds
are coming in, and I can hear the rumbling
of atom bombs
that makes tsunamis.
like a butterfly flapping its wings
On the other side
of the world
is a tornado in Brooklyn, torrential rain in Jamaica, an earthquake in Haiti, a typhoon in Vietnam, a monsoon in Korea,
a landslide in India,
a fire in San Diego,
massive flooding in China,
China,
a mudslide in
Chiapas,
a tidal wave in Indonesia,
acid rain in
Hiroshima.
It's been snowing in the desert, y'all.
Something
Is wrong here.
The rivers don't run like they used to.
Stay calm.
This is an emergency.
I tell you if I knew,
But the future
hasn't said a word to me. She's angry
that her children
won't be born debt free. Destiny said man-made curses
are her worst
pet peeve.
They are selling the rain.
They are leasing the rivers
They are auctioning off the oceans
to the highest bidders.
as giant chunks of the polar ice cap
Dislodged from the North Pole, and tourists flock to the site to take pictures.
There is disaster tourism.
Like there's disaster profiteering
Off the torrential storms
and the warring
and the wrath
of global warming. Who
will get paid to rebuild?
and who will they build for?
Who will endure the drought and the rain?
Who will be safe and sound indoors?
Who built the missiles?
The smart bombs,
the rockets?
who gets raided?
And who gets paid
From whose pockets? Who gets sent off to war? Who dies for whose profits? Who
gets
remembered? Who's
been
forgotten?
paved concrete over the pores of the earth
to make our lives harder, and build buildings to scrape skies, trying to get closer to God, but move farther.
Our history's been lost to forgetfulness,
Erased by the frontiers of manifest destiny,
as if
destiny were man-made or manifested in the
in the hands
hands
of colonial planners
who build their thrones atop the remains of nations like gravestones. Celebrate Columbus Day
with clearance sales
to buy up stuff to cover up that which cannot be bought or sold, only stolen,
like breath
or life or home, or an entire people who once believed that land could never be owned.
and the ocean is worth more than gold.
And water cannot be held captive.
It will reshape even stone, and even when the last tree stands alone,
It still makes a sound long after it's fallen, in a forest that lived even if no one saw it, and fed the world its breath.
whether or not we applauded.
One hand clapping sounds a lot
Like the rhythms
we lost in generations who sang
even as they
departed.
And now we stand
At the doorway, in the hallway, life brought us
to this crossroads
of lost hope and undeniable promise,
where we choose
between paths beyond rightness or wrongness
that will lead to the brink
of the planet's exhaustion, or the age of compassion,
where the meek
become strongest and re-inherit the earth and redefine progress.
With the conviction that creativity is the antidote to destruction, that was Climbing Poetry from their 2017 album Intrinsic. My name is Martha Senator, and the show is Listen and Be Heard. Here in the Audio Garden in Greenville, South Carolina, I was joined by our Poet Laureate and Teen Poet Laureate. They showed up to share some poetry with me and talk about their laureate experiences so far as the first poet laureates in Greenville. So I'm going to share that whole conversation with you in a few weeks. But since we've been on the subject of banning books, I was going to just listen into a little bit of that to give you an idea of who they are and what they're thinking about, and plant a little seed for you to come back and listen to their poetry in a future episode.
The Bluest Eye with Toni Morrison.
Once it's heard, it can't be unheard. Once it's published, it's not going to be unpublished. Once you read the poem, you can't unread it. No matter how an individual may try to push it to the side, forget about it, it's still in there. And it's the words, the meaning, the feelings behind it are taking root in their psyche, and they can't get rid of it.
By Sarah J. This book is gay by Juno Dawson.
I've been asking most of our guests about banned books, the phenomenon of banned books in this country. And I wanted to ask about the library here, your relationship with the library, how you feel about banned books. I think it's my understanding that the library is not putting out displays in order to avoid some controversy over banned books. And I wonder if our poets laureates could maybe speak on this subject for a moment.
Well, first of all, let me say my relationship to the library in Greenville is very fortuitous in the fact that I was an avid library goer in middle school, and I lived in the rural part of the county. And one of the ways I had access was the bookmobile that came to our neighborhood. And I was one of those kids who ran after the bookmobile like some kids ran after the ice cream truck. So it really was important to me to read and to expand my mind and my horizon. I was always on a path, so I want to say that, and I've always supported the library. Now, on banned books, here's what I feel about banned books is that you should read what you want to read. And matter of fact, I think when we ban books, we actually highlight attention to those books so they will be read. So I think we should be mindful of what I don't think it's another citizen's right to ban somebody else from what they deem important in their life. And so I did not know about them not putting out displays about the banned books, but I did go to the last board meeting, so I want to get a little bit more involved. But I'm, of course, an outspoken advocate that everyone should be able to read whatever they want to read. When I was young, I was not limited. My parents let me read everything, and I felt like that was helping me to become a poet. The authors, I felt like they were friends that I had never met, and they were keepers of a map, and they provided me a map to figure out what I needed to do in my life.
I really agree with what Glenis is saying. I think, if there's something that you want to read, you shouldn't be denied access to that, right? I think that literacy and interest in literature is something that we want to promote and we want to get out there. And when you're telling someone that something that they may want isn't available to them, you're telling them that whatever they'll want in the future isn't something they should want, right? And even though like some books may have undertones and lessons that some people may not want in their lives, it's their decision to make that choice. And if they do want that, that says what it needs to about them, and it's not necessarily at the book's fault. I think it's more the fault of any policymaker who's deciding that, someone who's interested in literature should not be, because that's really what a book ban is. You're saying that whatever you're interested in, you don't have the right to be interested in that. And I think that that's way more problematic than what may be within those books themselves.
PEN America reported while the movement to ban books is driven by a vocal minority demanding censorship, a 2022 poll conducted by the American Library Association found that over 70% of parents oppose book banning, leaving many public school districts in a bind. We want to hear from you to contribute to our banned book segment here on Listen and Be Heard. You can use your voice memo app on your smartphone and record a short message. Introduce yourself, just your first name. Hi, my name is. Record no more than 2 to 3 minutes. Hold the phone about an inch or so away from your chin and find a quiet place to make that recording. Email it to us at bbooks@listenandbeheard.net. bbooks@listenandbeheard.net by hitting that share button in the app. All these instructions we'll also have at listenandbeheard.net. And when you submit that recording, please share with us your name if you'd like to be added to our mailing list, and also that you give permission for Listen and Be Heard to include your voice in the radio show and in the podcast. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeannie. So I've been digging, and here it is, like I promised, something special. A live recording from Sekou Sundiata from February 2nd, 1998, when I was hosting a show on WBAI with DJ Jeannie Hopper, who was on the board, and Sekou, he was one of several guests in the studio.
This is the story of the Titanic told from the point of view of Shine, who was the only brother on the Titanic. They don't tell you that in the movie. It was 1912 when the word got around that the mighty Titanic, it went down. And the captain said to Shine, neither fear nor doubt. I got 100 more pumps, Shine, just to keep the water out. Shine said, your words sound good, they sound so true, but Captain, words won't do. And Shine swam on. So the story goes, the ship began to sink, and Shine took off his clothes and jumped into the brink. Baby, little fish, big fish, shark fish too, you better get out the way, Shine is shining through. Then came the millionaire. He stood up on the deck. He took it to the bridge. He said, I'll give you a line of credit, Shine, and you make sure I live. Shine said, my man, Big Willie, you sound sincere. Put your line of credit on this water right here. You got arms, you got legs, far as I can see. Get your in this water and swim like me. The millionaire had a daughter. Miss Lord have mercy was her name. She was a rich witch in a red dress. Titanic was her game. Sweet Miss Mercy, she stood up on the deck, Gucci in her hand and a dress around her neck. She said, Shine, Shine, save poor me, and I'll give you everything that your eyes can see. Shine said, there's love on the land, there's love on the sea, but the love on the land is the love for me. And Shine swam on. The president called to talk to him. He wanted him to testify, but Shine was with his lady, and they was on the fly. By the time we got the news of what was going down, Shine and his lady took the A train uptown.
Magnetic attraction, mutual satisfaction, first sight, love at eye contact. I love it that our passion is such a high contrast to the possessiveness that limited our love ships in the past. I'm a bird who sings in the springtime. She's a girl who smiles like the sunrise. Though I love the days when she's all mine, I don't try to bottle her sunshine. Loving, crushing, she sees me staring. Baby, maybe loving is sharing. Feel the wind of love on the sky. I'm a bird that can't help but fly. I can't fit inside monogamy's philosophies of one and only, constantly stopping me from boundlessly expressing what is possibly the greatest force in all of me. My heart cannot be property. Ownership is opposite of all that love has taught to me. The infinite capacity of each of us to happily surrender to the majesty of learning love's true mastery. Each one of us a tapestry, anatomy like galaxies. It's fallacy. I need someone complete the other half of me. Reality is many souls visuals reflect my whole totality, complexity, vitality, my sensual mentality, rather than analogies of draining like a battery. The more and more I practice love, the more my love grows naturally. I know a few interpreters think jealousy is flattery. I avidly promote, we try to rise up from the agony, try out a brand new strategy, flip envy into ecstasy, amplify through alchemy. I'm a bird who sings in the springtime. She's a girl who smiles like the sunrise. Though I love the days when she's all mine, I don't try to bottle her sunshine. Got a feeling, go girl, express it. Love is never love when possessive. Feel the wind of love on the sky. She's a bird that can't help but fly.
If a girl asks you to dance, then dance with the girl. And if it feels right, then you should hold hands with the girl. Cause I believe that God is love, and love, she keeps telling me to step back, relax, and deconstruct your jealousy. Cause jealousy is fear. Some days I'm scared of losing you, but you and I are free to leave if we choose to. I'm taking down the bricks of this invisible wall. And when the wind of love blows, now we both can feel it all. Cause you love to hear me sing, even if you didn't write the note. I love to hear you laugh, even if I didn't tell the joke. You know I love to cuddle with you, pull your body close. And I love it when you're happy, even if I have to let you go. Cause if you need your space, then baby you can let me know. I love you from afar, you my star in the telescope. I'm not a god, I'm not a fool, but I would be both to think that love was something I could control, right?
I'm a bird who sings in the springtime. She's a girl who smiles like the sunrise. Though I love the days when she's all mine, I don't try to bottle her sunshine. Trusting, loving, true understanding. Universe of us is expanding. Feel the wind of love on the sky. We are birds that can't help but fly.
I love how your empathy finds joy in my intimacy with someone else that's into me. Love is limitless infinitely. I love it how my loyalty dissolves your insecurity. Our love, it blooms concurrently. You know that's my priority. I'm soaring through an odyssey deep in the realms of honesty, with conscious choreography, consensual autonomy, equality, responsibly. I feel our trusted waters me. A love like this is selflessly fulfilling like a prophecy. Cause there's no better way to love me than through honesty and trusting. It's not indiscriminate loving, it's rising up to realize your love's the greatest gift to me. It's lifting me above the narrow space of normativity. Now we are one, I am free, and you can take the sky with me. Cause love is phoenix flying, rise up above to feel the breeze. Some days will be a struggle, some will fly by with ease, but I'd love it if you trust to take this journey with me.
I'm a bird who sings in the springtime. She's a girl who smiles like the sunrise. Though I love the days when she's all mine, I don't try to bottle her sunshine. Got a feeling, go on, express it. Love is never love when possessive. Feel the wind of love on the sky. She's a bird that can't help but fly.
That was one more cut from poetry called Can't Help But Fly. So we've gotten almost to the end of the show, and I still haven't talked about what I've done to get my novel published since last week. And that's because the answer is nothing, except to think about it. Maybe I should just be waiting until I get more feedback and focus on publishing something else while I wait. I don't know. I can get paralyzed by indecision sometimes, especially when I feel like I don't know what I'm doing or that I'm facing rejection once again. I know I talked about that last week. So I'm looking forward, though, to this conversation I'm going to have with Meg Reed. She's the executive director of Hub City Press, which is a hotbed of literary activity in Spartanburg, South Carolina. They publish books, they have a bookstore, they do workshops, and more. So she's going to be doing a workshop in February on the path to publication. And when I saw that, I invited her to the garden, and she was very friendly and agreed to visit us, give us a little of her time. And so in a couple weeks, on the same day that we'll hear more from Glenis Redmond and Anna Castro Spratt, the Poet Laureates of Greenville, South Carolina, we'll also hear from Meg Reed from Hub City Publications in Spartanburg, South Carolina, about the path to publication. But next week is the Winter Climate Special with Laura Langnick. We'll be talking about alternatives to capitalism. She's the author of Resilient Agriculture, and if you have not looked at that book, please go check it out of our free library or go look for it in your neighborhood, bookstore or library. And we'll also be hearing later on a counter story to The Little Mermaid from Leslie Ann Brown, who will call me in the audio garden all the way from Denmark. So those are a few things that you could look forward to if you visit us here again in the audio garden. My name is Martha Senator, and this has been an hour for readers and writers in the audio garden. I want to thank Davyne Dial, as always, for introducing Listen and Be Heard to the airwaves at her station in WPVM in Asheville, North Carolina. Thanks to KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, for carrying our show there. Thank you to DJ Jeannie Hopper, my associate producer. Jeremiah Cothran for editing on the interviews. Jay Rodriguez Sierra for his loops and bits of music here and there. You can visit him at jrodriguezsierra.com. You can visit Listen and Be Heard at listenandbeheard.net, where you will find an archive of all of our previous shows. You can also tune in to 24/7 live streaming Listen and Be Heard radio at WLBH.org. I always enjoy the sights and sounds, but most of all, the company. And I would really like to hear from you. So please drop me a line at editor@listenandbeheard.net. Tell me what you think about what you've heard. Or even better yet, record something on your memo app on your phone. Send me that. Let's get a conversation going. I want to thank you for listening and for the opportunity to be heard. I'll see you next week.
Living it is. Giving it. Having it to give. Taking it. Moving it around. Living it, giving it, having it, taking it, moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. Living it is loving it. Living it is sewing a coat, investing each stitch with magic, creating a unique design, putting it on and wearing it for the rest of your life. Living it is knowing that what you see, what you hear is tangible. It's being a rock in the river and being the river too. It's hearing, you'll never be able to do that. Living it is knowing you will do it. It's speaking the unspoken. It's thinking the unthinkable. It's doing the unexpected. It's quitting before you get fired. giving it. Giving it is having it. Having it is taking it. Taking it is moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. Living it is loving it. Living it is loving a man you're not supposed to love. It's giving way to emotions, creating commotions, calling attention to yourself. And I like that. Living it is learning from someone who can actually show you. It's cleaning your teacher's house or helping her to find one. It's never ever saying J-O-B. Living it is a one-way ticket and no solid plans. It's smoking a J in a smoke cafe in Amsterdam. It's saying the day is pretty in a strange new city. Living it is giving it. Giving it is having it. Having it is taking it. Taking it is moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. Living it is having nothing to lose and everything to gain. It's putting all of your charms and attributes, every single one of them, to good use. It's knowing the kindness of strangers and love for sale. Living it is knowing where to buy rice and beans and bulk. It's knowing herbs are cheaper than doctors. It's keeping it together when you're falling apart. It's writing poetry to ease a broken heart. Living it is knowing the stage, looking into bright lights, late nights, barroom fights, fantastic sights, inspiration, and moving on, 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 and moving on. Because living it is giving it. Giving it is having it to give. Having it to give is taking it, snatching it, moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it.